My Side of the Mountain, page 166. Lonely? I've hardly had a quiet moment since arriving. Stop being a reporter and let's eat. Besides, there are people in the city who are lonelier than I. Okay, let's eat. This is good. Darned good. In fact, the best meal I've ever eaten. He ate and stopped asking questions. We spent the next week fishing, hunting, trapping, gathering greens and bulbs. Matt talked less and less, slept, hiked, and pondered. He also ate well and kept Frightful very busy. He made himself a pair of moccasins out of deer hide and a hat that I can't even describe. We didn't have a mirror, so he never knew how it looked, but I can say this. When I happened to meet him as we came fishing along the stream bed, I was always startled. I never did get used to that hat, so Matt must not be too good at making hats. Toward the end of the week, who should we find sleeping in my bed after returning from a fishing trip? But
The raccoon.
Bando. Spring vacation, he said. That night we played our reed whistles for Matt by an outdoor fire. It was that warm. Matt and Bando also decided to make a guest house out of one of the other trees. I said, yes, let's, because I felt that way, although I knew what it meant. A guest house meant I was no longer a runaway. I was no longer hiding in the wilderness. I was living in the woods like anyone else lives in a house. People drop by, neighbors come for dinner, there are 3 meals to get, shopping to do, the cleaning to accomplish. I felt exactly as I felt when I was home. The only difference was that I was a little harder to visit out here, but not too hard. There sat Matt and Bando. We all burned and dug out another hemlock tree. I worked with them, wondering what was happening to me. Why didn't I cry, no? What made me happily build a city in the forest? Because that is what we were doing. When the tree was done, Bando had discovered that the sap was running in willow trees and the limbs were just right for slide whistles. He spent the evening making us trombones. We played them together. That word, together. Maybe that was the answer to the city. Matt said rather uncomfortably just before bedtime, there may be some photographers in these hills. Matt! I hardly protested. What did you write? It was Bando who pulled out the article. He read it. A few follow-ups and comments from many other papers. Then he leaned back against his leaning tree as it had come to be and puffed silently on his pipe. Let's face it, Thoreau. You can't live in America today and be quietly different. If you are going to be different, you are going to stand out and people are going to hear about you. And in your case, if they hear about you, they will remove you to the city or move you and you won't be different anymore. A pause. Did the owls nest, Thoreau? I told him about the owls and how the young played around the hemlock, and then we went to bed a little sad, all of us. Time was running out. Matt had to return to school, and Bando stayed on to help burn out another tree for another guest house. We chopped off the blackened wood, made one bed, and started the second before he had to return to his teaching. I wasn't alone long. Mr. Jacket found me. Remember him? Kid from the drugstore? I was out on the raft trying to catch an enormous snapping turtle. I would take my line, but when I got its head above water, it would eye me with those cold ancient eyes and let go. Frightful was nearby. I was making a noose to throw over the turtle's head, and the next time it surfaced, when Frightful lit on my shoulder with a thud and a hard grip, she was drawn up and tense, which in her language said, people. So I wasn't surprised to hear a voice call me from across the stream. Hi, Daniel Boone. What are you doing? There stood Mr. Jacket. Well, I'm trying to get this whale of a snapper, I said, in such an ordinary voice that it was dull. I went on with noose making, and he called out, hit it with a club. I still couldn't catch the old tiger, so I rafted to shore and got Mr. Jacket. About an hour later, we had the turtle, had cleaned it, and I knew that Mr. Jacket was Tom Sidler. Come on up to the house, I said, and he came on up to the house, and it was just like after school on 3rd Avenue. He wanted to see everything, of course, and he did think it unusual, but he got over it in a hurry and settled down to help me prepare meat for turtle soup. He dug the onions for it while I got it boiling in a tin can. Turtle is tough as a rock and has to be boiled for hours before it gets tender. We flavored the soup with hickory salt and cut a lot of Solomon seal tubers into it. Tom said it was too thin, and I thickened it with mashed up nuts. I had run out of acorn flour. I tried some orris root in it. Pretty fair. Want to stay and eat it and spend the night, I asked. him somewhere along the way? He said, sure, but he added that he better go home and tell his mother. It took him 2 hours to get back, and the turtle was still tough, so we went out to the meadow to fly Frightful. She caught her own meal. We tied her to the perch and climbed in the gorge until almost dark. We ate turtle soup. Tom slept in the guest tree. I lay awake wondering what had happened. Everything seemed so everyday. I liked Tom and he liked me, and he came up often, almost every weekend. He told me about his bowling team and some of his friends, and I began to feel I knew a lot of people in the town below the mountain. This made my wilderness small. When Tom left one weekend, I wrote this down. Tom said that he and Reed went to an empty house, and when they heard the real estate man come in, they slid down the laundry chute to the basement and crawled out the basement window. He said a water main broke and flooded the school grounds, and all the kids took off their shoes and played baseball in it. I drew a line through all of this and wrote, I haven't seen the Baron Weasel. I think he has deserted his den by the boulder. A catbird is nesting nearby. Apparently it has learned that Frightful is tied some of the time because it comes right up to the fireplace for scraps when the leash is snapped. I drew a line through this too and filled up the rest of the piece of bark with a drawing of Frightful. I went to the library and the next day took out 4 books. Aaron came back. He came back right to the Hemlock Forest and called. I didn't ask him how he knew I was there. He stayed for a week, mostly puttering around with the willow whistles. He never asked what I was doing on the mountain. It was as if he already knew. As if he had talked to someone or read something and there was nothing more to question. I had the feeling that I was an old story somewhere beyond the foot of the mountain. I didn't care. Bando got a car and came up more often. He never mentioned any more newspaper stories, and I never asked him. I just said to him one day, I seem to have an address now. He said, you do. I said, is it Broadway and 42nd Street? He said, almost. His eyes knitted and he looked at me sadly. It's all right, Bando. Maybe you'd better bring me a shirt and some blue jeans when you come next time. I was thinking, if they haven't sold that house in town, maybe Tom and I could slide down the laundry chute. Bando slowly turned a willow whistle over in his hands, and he didn't play it.